thank you for participating in the Humane Summit, a virtual speaker series brought to you by the Humane Education Coalition. This session is sponsored by the Griffin Press and the Humane Society of the United States. We are grateful for your attendance today for Dr. Cini Bretzlaff-Holstein's speaker session, Humane Education, Social Work Education, a potential collaborative partner. Cini is the BSW Program Director, Social Work Department Chair, and Associate Professor of Social Work at Trinity Christian College in Illinois. Cini's scholarly interests include food justice, environmental and ecological justice, social work education and humane education, and the human-animal bond in social work. At this time, I will pass things over to our speaker, Cini Bretzlaff-Holstein.
Hello, my name is Cini Bretzlaff-Holstein, and I'm greeting you all from the south suburbs of Chicago in my office on the campus of Trinity Christian College, and very excited to talk to you all a little bit about my dissertation research. I'm a social work professor here at Trinity, and really am interested in humane education and how our two disciplines can come together, as from my perspective, I think we have a lot in common. And so my research is really about exploring that, really that theory that I have. And so I'm here to talk a little bit about that. But before I get started, I think it's important to talk a little bit about what social work is. There's some different definitions out there, even different understandings and perceptions about what social work is. So I think before I get into my research findings, at least a little bit of it today anyway, I want to first just share with you all a little bit about what social work is, so we can make sure we start out on the same page. As I recognize, I'm speaking to humane educators from around the world, and I'm usually speaking to social workers. So just really briefly, there's two different associations, professional organizations in particular, whose definition of social work I want to introduce you to if you're not familiar already. The National Association of Social Workers is a professional organization here in the United States. And as you can see from the definition of what social work is and our mission, it's to enhance human well-being, help meet the basic human needs of all people, empowerment of people who are vulnerable, oppressed, living in poverty, etc. And then you look at the International Federation of Social Workers definition, again, similar themes: promoting social change, social development, social cohesion, and the empowerment and liberation of people. And so you can see a theme here. Social work is very much about human rights, social justice. It's very human-centric in its mission, both here in the United States and internationally speaking. What's interesting about the social work profession is that historically, our roots actually were much more connected to the welfare of animals. One example I'll give is before there was any kind of legislation for protecting children, it was actually anti-cruelty to animals organizations and societies in the 19th century, early 20th century that really served as a template for creating legislation to counter cruelty and abuse and neglect of children. And so that was that's something that our students in an Introduction to Social Work course learn. There's a very historical case that actually launched this about a little girl named Mary Ellen Foster in New York. And so we do have some connections to historically to animal welfare and animal rights, but on the whole, as a discipline and as a profession, that's not the norm anymore. A couple other things I want to say about social work really quickly before we get into the research findings. There's two important frameworks that really kind of formulated my research question and how I see social work education could be a benefactor of all the wisdom and knowledge and experience of humane education. And those frameworks are the ecological perspective and person and environment, which essentially are saying that there's a give and take, a reciprocal relationship between the person and their social environment. And so the social environment is referring to a person and their family, their neighborhood, their religious place of worship, their school, their place of employment, their community, those sorts of things. And so it's very much recognizing the interconnectedness of those things, but it's not talking about necessarily the physical, natural environment. When we're thinking about the environment, as you all are thinking about the environment, as we're talking about humane education specifically. More and more, the social work profession has been becoming more involved with environmental justice outside of just being like a specialization in the literature or a specialization of researchers. The global agenda for social work and social development, which was, I won't list all of the international organizations that drafted this, but essentially they are beginning to recognize that people's health and well-being suffer as a result of inequalities and unsustainable environments related to climate change, pollutants, natural disasters, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is more conversation that's happening on a international level. Here in the United States, there's a conversation happening about the natural living world and the importance of social workers being involved and engaged in addressing a lot of these issues that impact our clients, but it's not necessarily a part of our curriculum across the board as of yet. It's not necessarily a normal part of our lens, a part of these two frameworks as explicitly as personally I think that it needs to be, personally and professionally. So why social work in humane education? So social work, as I mentioned, historically, yes, we have the animal welfare connection from our roots back in the 19th century, 20th century. Currently, in present day social work discipline and practice, some of the ways that we connect specifically to animals, as far as that part of humane education is really the human-animal bond, the human-animal relationship in social work. So for instance, if assessing the role of companion animals in a family system is certainly something that social workers can do if they're trained to do so. It's something I try to teach my students. Another way that social workers kind of have animals on their radar is recognizing the link between animal cruelty and various forms of violence against humans, such as child abuse, domestic violence, and those sorts of things. And then lastly, another way animals are on social work's radar is through integrating and partnering with animals as part of an intervention strategy with clients. So whether that's canine assisted therapy, equine assisted therapy, those sorts of things, right? And so my argument really is that I want to invite the social work profession, specifically through social work education, because social work educators, which I am, is, our role is to help students become ethically competent social work practitioners. So these are future prospective social workers, right? And so I really think it's important that, obviously we want to prepare them as well as we can. And I'm seeing some gaps. And I think that we could expand our understanding of the person and environment and the ecological perspective and really move away from really our human-centric, our anthropocentric worldview of, where humans are the most important species, nature exists for humans. I don't agree with that personally, but also professionally, and really want to invite social work to move towards more of a sense of responsibility to the natural living world, a sense of responsibility to non-human animals, and basically really recognizing this human nature connection. So in the literature, social work literature, it's what's called eco-social work. So I'm not the only one out there who's certainly recognizing that the human-animal connection, climate change, environmental justice, ecological justice are things that social work education really needs to be paying attention to. But I'm basically proposing humane education, collaborating with humane education could be one of the ways in which we as the social work discipline can broaden our understanding and have specific tools to really engage in these really big issues and for the betterment of us all, really. So let me tell you a little bit about my research study, and then I'll get into the findings. And so this was a qualitative research study. It was pretty small. I did 6 semi-structured interviews. Of course, I had to go through the whole IRB internal review board to make sure it's okay to do these. So that was not a problem. And I targeted 2 institutions specifically, and you can see their logos here on the screen. So I targeted 3 faculty, social work faculty from University of Denver's Graduate School of Social Work, their Institute for Human Animal Connection, and I'll just refer to them as IHAC moving forward. And then I interviewed 3 faculty from the Institute for Humane Education, and of course I'll refer to them as IHE as I continue to talk. So these interviews were conducted over Skype, etc. Certainly a limitation of this was the sample size. It's only 6 folks that I was able to talk to, but I did get a lot of really helpful information, and essentially found for me that my hypothesis that our 2 disciplines have a lot in common and could work together, that was essentially, really, I'm giving you a preview, was essentially the outcome that the interviewees also came to as well, the conclusion they came to as well. So what was fun doing these interviews was, hearing the sights and sounds of the outdoors, folks referencing dogs sleeping on a chair, hearing barking, it was really enjoyable talking to social workers who, were sitting outside, or humane educators were sitting outside and referencing their dogs. So it was really a neat environment to do that with them. All right, so here's my overarching research questions. The first one, so how are humane education and social work education similar and different? And then based on these comparisons, how might humane education complement or integrate with social work and social work education, particularly in light of the social work profession's continued understanding of environmental ethics, environmental justice, and human-animal relationships? So again, as I said earlier in this presentation, social work is certainly not completely behind. I'm not critiquing my profession that I am very proud to be a part of and love, but we certainly have some work to do, have some catching up to do from my perspective. And though there is a number of pieces in the literature, a lot of folks are saying we need to do more, And so I'm saying humane education could be one of those ways in which we can do more, okay? So these are some of the categorical questions from my research. I'm not going to read through them. You can always look back at these slides later, but there's only 3 that we have time for me to cover. And those are, we're going to look at the findings from the similarities and differences between the 2 disciplines, the lessons social work can learn from humane education, and then how the 2 might complement each other. So let's first start with the similarities noted by the IHAC faculty. So again, these are the social work faculty. So they essentially said both disciplines are social justice focused, have a broad understanding of systems that exist in various forms of injustice. One faculty stated that the 2 are, quote, completely, largely identical frameworks that are equally broad in many regards. And that is actually how I went into this research study. I felt the same way. It's like, yeah, there's a lot that we have in common. In reflecting on how these disciplines are rooted in social justice specifically, one faculty member said, quote, yeah, well, I would hope that social justice would be humane. It's not always. Justice is a unique concept. Yet absolutely, in my way of thinking, they overlap. That the actions that are the most just are also humane. And so this social work faculty member was basically making the connections between, in order to truly do social justice, that justice needs to be also humane. And then what does that mean? What are the implications for social work specifically? Okay. All right, for the IHE faculty, so the humane education faculty, some similarities they noted are the 2 are, quote, on the same train, working for positive change. Both work for social justice. Again, we heard that before. Both have a goal of improving the world and empowering, quote, other people to bring equity, to bring justice. Both are broad disciplines. And that's very true. Social work is a very broad discipline. I know humane educators, you all are from all over the world. You're working in varied capacities and contexts. Some of you are working with mainly animals. Some of you might be working mainly in conservation. lots of different areas and have lots of different skill sets and backgrounds. And the same thing with social work. It's a very versatile discipline and profession, which frankly is why a number of our students are drawn to the profession, because they can pretty much do anything with it. It's really about a framework, a lens, and a skill set that they're able to bring to the world and to their context in which they serve. Lastly, the IE faculty also said, one member said, there is a, quote, fundamental connection between social work and humane education. So both sets of faculty are saying, yes, we have a lot in common. We agree. Okay. But the difference is, so for the IHAC faculty, the social work faculty said, quote, while the concepts of humane education and social work education should be fundamentally connected, they are not. So they're similar, but there's a disconnect. The primary difference, social work is blind to and not paying attention to the living world. So this is one of the differences that one of the interviewees, one of the faculty indicated, that we have a blind spot. Humane education tends to focus more on animals, and social work education focus more on people. And yet there is an opportunity for the two to come together, as it's a good time for social workers recognizing more the importance of non-human animals and the human-animal bond. So there's still a sense of hope, though there's differences, there's disconnect, there's opportunity. Okay, the IE faculty, the differences they noted, stated that humane education purposefully includes animals and the environment in its discipline, which you all know, right? For social work, any inclusion of animals in social work tends to be related to animal-assisted therapy or the human-animal bond for helping people cope with issues such as trauma. And frankly, that was right on that knowledge base that this IE faculty member stated, because as I had mentioned earlier, this is the way that social work tends to interact with animals, is in these various capacities. So they nailed it. One faculty member described humane education as not being as well known or as well established or respected discipline as social work and social work education. And that's true in the sense that social work as a profession, the professionalization of social work actually occurred in the 1920s. So almost 100 years we've been established as an actual profession, but our roots go back even further than that, which I won't do a history lesson at this time. But yeah, so there is a little bit, a more established recognition even in state legislation, et cetera, here in the United States, worldwide, and that sort of thing. Okay, we're getting there, friends. So how do they complement each other? Social work and social work education need to incorporate and integrate more of humane education. So this is comments coming, basically summation comments coming from both sets of faculty. They both agree that humane education could be integrated more within the body of knowledge, social work's body of knowledge and practice approaches. Social work needs to give animals in the environment a place at the table. They all agree with that. One example that a humane education faculty member recommended was, yes, a desire for an interprofessional, interdisciplinary partnering. And the specific example given was to co-create and pilot a social work and humane education course at the master's level as a sort of lab to kind of pilot this idea of working together to educate future social workers, to educate future humane educators. So in reflecting this idea, the individual stated, a lot of times things begin that way. It helps clarify thinking, like what would a social work student need to know? What would a humane educator need to know? Like to really do the hard work of bringing those things together in a single course could be like a little microcosm for how to bring those things together in a wider way. And so that was a suggestion for how they can come together, they can complement each other and work together. One thing I'll note really quickly is IHAC at Denver, they do have a early childhood humane education certificate program, and that was actually in the works when I did these interviews back in summer March-ish of 2016. And so that's launched and up and running. So really, IHAC is the only social work education institution that has any kind of very explicit humane education programming within their program certificate and program offerings. So that's wonderful, but let's spread the love is what I say. So here's some proposed strategies, and I'll wrap this up here. So again, the co-teaching a class at the master's level, I think that's a great idea. So I put that in there. Another idea for bringing the two disciplines together more specifically in order for to have a mutually beneficial relationship, is like, why can't social workers and social work educators essentially learn from humane educators, whether it's taking advantage of IHE's professional development opportunities, maybe even participating in a teaching institute at IHE or even IHAC, maybe do it together for social work educators and practitioners and even humane educators like that. What an interesting thing to offer some sort of teaching institute of some sort where social workers, social educators, humane educators are coming together, and they're either working on maybe some piece of curriculum, a course, or something like that, bouncing ideas off one another, learning about what humane education is, especially for the social workers, and then looking for ways to collaborate potentially. And so that's an idea. And then lastly, just to kind of bring some organizations together, perhaps IHE, IHAC, the Humane Education Coalition, connect with international social work organizations like the International Association of Schools of Social Work, the International Council on Social Welfare, and the International Federation of Social Workers, as they are the ones who drafted the global agenda for social work and social development and are making those statements of recognizing that we need to pay attention to what's happening with climate change, what's happening in the natural environment because of the impacts it's having on human rights, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so those are just some ideas. I'm actually would love to brainstorm with anyone about other ideas. But just to wrap it up, and thank you for your patience, both social work and humane education, again, we're rooted in social justice. We want a lot of the same things, friends. We have a lot of strengths and a lot to bring to the table. I think you all probably know that as humane educators doing the work that you're doing around the world. And ultimately, the way I see it, for the good of all, so humans, non-human animals, and the environment working together, social work and humane education can really help bring about an even greater outcome for change. We know that the time to create change is now. Just thinking about the UN climate change report is a way to get the fire burning and get moving. And then of course the ecological crisis, is demanding that social work and social work education be a part of that conversation, to have a place at the table. And so why not speak with folks who are already doing a lot of this really great work when we have a lot in common? Let's work together. Let's get to know each other more, and let's see what we can do together. And so I thank you all very much for your time. And again, this is a very, very brief version of the research findings. I didn't have time to throw in a lot of the really long quotes. There's some really powerful quotes that is actually in the manuscript for this research paper, but hopefully you got at least a grasp of some of the findings. And if you do have questions or would like to engage in further conversation, my contact information is there. Certainly had to follow the example of many of the other presenters and throw in a photo of myself with my dogs, who are both rescues, Gretel and Cedric. And so thank you all very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.
This concludes our speaker session. Thank you so much for joining us. You can learn more here or by clicking the resource links in the summit. We hope you've enjoyed this speaker session and that you'll join us for another one soon. Please consider making a donation to the Humane Education Coalition to help us continue providing programs and events like the Humane Summit. We rely on your support to help create a more compassionate, just, and sustainable future through education. Visit hecoalition.org/give to contribute today. Thanks again.